Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music. Last week we looked at modal gating as part of our discussion of John Adams' 70th birthday. Well, modes are a way of thinking about scales, and it's worth taking a closer look at what we mean when we say mode and how modal gating can help us get new, rich colors into our music. Let's take a look. So you've probably heard about modes, and you may have heard the classic 19th century names for them. Each step of the major scale has a mode that's built on it. That's one way to learn them. I learned the Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian modes. I did. And is it worth knowing those names? It might be if you want to talk to somebody about them. But here's another way of thinking about them, and a way which you can use in your music right away. Let's take a look at the screen here. The major scale is made of a series of whole and half steps, and it's really visible here. There's a whole step between these two notes, and a half step between those two notes. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. That's the conventional major scale. Now, if I just simply shift my hands up one note in the scale and do exactly what I just did, I'll get a new arrangement of whole and half steps. There's a whole step here, but it's very visible, a half step there. Whole, half, whole, 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 half, whole. Well, you can imagine right away that there's a version of that on every step of the scale, and that's how modes are conventionally taught. Modal gating is a way of keeping a single root note, let's say C, and shifting that set of notes to move it to a new mode. So here's my C scale, the C major scale. Now, if I want to shift those notes so that C is the second step of some scale, I need to know my scales pretty well, but I know that C is the second step of the B flat scale, and I know that the E has to be E flat, and the B has to be B flat. So I can just create that. Here we go. You can see what happened to this set of pitches. C is still the root note, but the arrangement of whole and half steps has changed. We'll look at this in Logic using Diva and the Arpeggiator in a moment. Let's stay with the piano for just a little bit longer. So I'm going to just build a stack, a chord. Root, third, 7th, 9th, 11th, sharp 11th. Now, I basically played 5 notes, and I thought of that as there's a G missing in there, but I thought of it as 2 triads, one on top of the other. Let's just stay with 5 notes for the time being. All those notes are in the G scale, which means that this root here, C, I'm thinking of it as the 4th step of a major scale. It's really pretty. Let's make a change. We'll do that same thing that we just did. Let's go from thinking of it as the 4th step of a major scale to the 2nd step of a major scale. Back to the 5th step of a major scale, 4th step of a major scale. Every time I rethink what step of the major scale that bottom note C is, I get a new set of notes. Well, here I am in Diva, and I'm going to play 2 triads, one on top of another. It's the triad pair that we had before. C triad, B minor triad. These are the notes from a G major scale. And after that, let's do as if C was the second step of the scale. It'll be a C minor triad at the bottom and a B flat major triad on the top. It's just the way it works out. Let's add one more. C is now the seventh step of the scale. In other words, it's the D flat. It's a very bright sound. Okay, those are the chords I'm going to use for this little sequence that I'm going to write here. So here's my simple stack. The first chord is based on the C being the fourth step of a major scale. And then going on, the next one, C is the second step of a major scale. All the notes have to conform to B flat major. The third one, I'm basing it on C being the seventh step of a major scale. That would be the D flat major scale. And so all the notes need to conform to that scale. And finally, C is the major third, the third of a major scale. It's the A flat major scale. And so those notes need to conform. You can see tiny little adjustments happening in every note every time. Now, if I drop an arpeggiator on that and I just put this preset percolating accents on it, I get a really great vibe. The bass could be C throughout. This is modal modulation. To use this approach effectively, you've got to know your scales, or you've got to know how to use the scale quantize function in Logic. Each major scale, each placement within the major scale has its own color. So you have to experiment. You may like certain sounds and you may dislike others. There are old school names for all these modes, but I like to think of the approach in reverse from the way it's usually taught. Pick a set of notes and then say to yourself, what if that bottom note was the third step of a scale? What if it was the fourth step of the scale? What would happen to each of the pitches in this set of notes in order to fit into the new scale? When you do that, you're using modal gating, and you'll get some really interesting sonorities out of it. It's not conventional chord progressions, but it is a really interesting way of creating harmonic movement. Well, I hope this has been useful. I know there's more to talk about this, and it's really hard to understand unless you get your hands on it. So get your hands on it and try it. Even if you just try going between two different scale sets. I really like the fifth step of the scale and the second step of the scale. They have a kind of a wonderful quality. Let me know how it works out for you. In the meantime, like and subscribe and ding the bell so that you'll know when I post a new video. And I'll see you next time.